Welcome to the Ultimate Coach Podcast, Conversations from Being, inspired by the book, The Ultimate Coach, written by Amy Hardison and Alan Thompson. Join us each week with the intention of expanding your state of being, and your experience will be remarkable. Remember, this is a podcast about being. It is a podcast about you. To explore more deeply, visit theultimatecoachbook.com. Now, enjoy today's conversation from being.
Welcome back for another episode of the Ultimate Coach Podcast. My name is Philippe Bartu, and today I'm joined by Lloyd Fickett. Lloyd, well, he's known Steve for over 30 years, and the interesting thing about Lloyd is there was a time when Steve was still working for Rodel, and Lloyd got hired as the coach. And there's a remarkable story that happened right after that in the chapter Demolition, which really caught my attention. And I'm really excited to speak to Lloyd today, who at the time developed something called the Rodel Principles, which later became to be the collaborative way. And over the last 25 years, he's been helping companies use the collaborative way to build the futures they envision. Lloyd, so good to have you here.
Philip, it's a delight. Look forward to it.
So, Lloyd, one of the first things I'd like to know is, my understanding is the first time you met Steve, you were a seminar leader for Landmark. Is that correct?
Correct.
And what do you remember from that time?
Well, not a lot, actually. He was one of the participants, and he was in a group with my wife, Lynn. And Lynn and him and Steve had a nice connection, and she felt that we should meet and connect. And so Lynn orchestrated the two of us getting together. And then once we did, we really hit it off well. It was, so that's what I remember from there.
Yeah. And at the time, he was working at Rodel.
He was working at Rodel, and then based off of our connection and his experience of me as a seminar leader, he championed me becoming a consultant, a coach for Rodel.
And then I remember that there was also, a lot of hesitation, right? Bringing you on board and the costs and would it be worth it? And in the end, his championing of you really helped you be someone that can be a stand for what later became the Rodel Principles.
Yeah, I think we really called it the Rodel Way.
Oh, it was the Rodel Way. Yes, that's right. The Rodel Way.
Right. Yeah. And then when I took it out beyond Rodel, then that's where I look, well, what do we call it outside of Rodel? And fortunately, I realized that the answer to that question was the collaborative way. So
that's right.
And yes.
So what was it how did the whole Rodel way? I know that there are, the 5 different practices, which are really ways of being. Maybe you could just introduce what those are and how were they actually developed?
Well, the first question is fairly easy. So there's 5 core practices. Those are listening generously. So really listening for the value, for the gold in what the other person is saying, setting aside our filters, our preconceived views, judgments, etc., and really listening for the value. Speaking straight, to speak honestly in a way that contributes to what we're what we're up to together. Then it's to be for each other. At the very beginning level, that's be for each other's success. Mm-hmm. And then as you get deeper, it's for the possibility that each of us is. And then honor commitments. So We're going to honor our commitments. We recognize that commitments are a relational phenomena, and that if I accept a commitment from you, I'm also committed to that future, and that we take on this practice together of supporting each other in honoring our commitments and in honoring our commitments. And then the last one is acknowledgement and appreciation, so that we're each a source of acknowledgement and appreciation across, down, up, throughout the organization. So it's kind of often this viewed as the secret sauce.
Well, I love the simplicity. Yeah, the simplicity of that. And I through the Ultimate Coach, I did order your book, The Collaborative Way, a story about engaging the minds and spirit of a company. And I just want to tell you how much I love the simplicity of it, and having the framework that you created. I'm curious to know, how did you come up with that?
Well, let me first just add two other elements of the framework.
Yes. Okay.
So one is all those practices are focused towards what we're up to together. So that helps true up the practice. Mm-hmm. And the other is it takes place in a context or framework of learning. So we're always learning this practice. I've been practicing the collaborative way for well over 30 years, and I'm still a learner. I'm learning to listen generously.
Yeah.
I have yet to master
of course.
the practice of listening generously, etc. So it keeps, and the practice keeps you on your developmental edge if you're deliberately practicing. Okay. So then to your question, how did this get developed? Well, it's there's two stories to that. One story is through my whole developmental journey in enlightenment and transformational work that I engaged in for most of my life in very focused manner, starting when I was 74, something like 24 years old. In the end of 74, yes, I went to work for Werner Erhard, and things were, so I've been on that journey for a long time. And a lot of what the collaborative way was my ongoing learning and my own practice, but not from a deliberate way. It was emerging, so I became a pretty good listener. I woke up to, as when I was running a center, really woke up to the power of appreciation and saw the unbelievable impacts that could occur when you operated out of appreciation. Yeah. I went to a center that had been traumatized and had lost its way, and helped it find its way back to the center. And when I got there, it was the staff were all bickering with each other, and I'm like, what? We're selling enlightenment, and what you're doing is bickering with each other? Come on, you can't do that. We're not going to relate to each other this way. Period. If you want to be here, we're going to work together and be for each other. So I took that stand, and that was a part of the history, though many years later, in reflection, I could see how this was emerging. But when it came to the actual collaborative way itself emerging, it was in working with Rodel, and I had helped merge two elements of the facilitated and merging two of the business companies of Rodel back together. So they merged back together as one company. Right. And I facilitate that. And Bill and Don Budinger approached me and said to me, listen, we recognize that in our marketplace is going to explode. Just in 1989, there was this breakthrough making computer chips, and Rodel was involved they sold the consumables that were used to polish silicon wafers, make computer chips. And they were the world leader in providing consumables for polishing silicon wafers. So this breakthrough was when they discovered how to you slice a silicon tube, and then you would polish it and then print a circuit on it. And that was a computer chip. And the breakthrough was when they discovered how to polish, print, polish, print, polish, print. So you had planes of printed circuits on one computer chip. It was one of the fundamental breakthroughs that allows for our smartphones and the whole world that we're living in. And they had the vision and foresight in '89 to recognize that this was going to cause an explosion in their marketplace. And the really big companies like 3M and Cabot would come into their marketplace, have way more PhDs to throw at the challenge, way more money to throw at the challenge. And their question was, how can we continue to be the world leader when that happens? And as they pondered that question, they came to the conclusion that there was only one way they could do that. And that is if they came up with an extraordinary way of working together. And so they approached me in 1990 and asked me if I would join them in developing that extraordinary way of working together. So for a consultant and a person that had been working in this field, that was like a dream challenge. And and I started, like most consultants would, with working with individuals to grow their leadership, to grow their commitment, shift their behaviors, etc. And we were having progress. We were making progress.
Yeah.
Okay. But when I looked at it, I said to myself, I don't think we're making the level of progress we need to make in order to meet the challenge that is coming today.
Yeah.
So I was standing in that gap, and I just really finally found myself in this corner where I said, well, what do we do? Just kind of asked that.
Yeah.
And to my surprise, I got an answer. And the answer was, you got to call out a small number of commitments that will define how we work and relate together, and that take on learning to work that way. And when I got that, it was like, whoa. And what might those be was my next question. And
I just want to slow that down first, because there are a couple of things. Firstly, just the courage for you to take on the challenge without knowing how. Yes. So firstly, I want to acknowledge that, a lot of people wait until they have the how-to, and then they go and sell the how-to. You didn't do that. You just jumped in. You knew that you would do what it takes to create this possibility. And that's already extraordinary. So I acknowledge that in you. And then the other thing I'm hearing is, gosh, you noticed something was missing, and you just noticed that the way we're going, it's not that for the level of extraordinary collaboration, something's missing.
You're right.
And you identified that. Yeah.
Because what the shift there is, well, then I asked myself, well, what might those practices be? And they came I just wrote 5 down. It was just right there. Now, in retrospect, I can see they were building all along, but in a moment that they arrived, and those have been the same 5 since then. And so the shift is such a simple and yet profound shift, is because we were working on listening with people, we're working on speaking straight, but it was working on that as an individual. The shift is that these become a committed way of relating, and now we're working on how we work together.
Right.
And we can really get good at working this way together if we committedly take on learning how to work together. And that shift into the we space, instead of the I, and developing the individual and having that be the primary focus is shift over to the we. Yeah. And the I has to follow in order to fulfill on the we, and that was the shift.
Yeah.
That's in the collaborative way. So
when you say shift, would you say that's a shift in being from going I to we.
Yes, as the primary focus. You got both.
Yeah.
You have to. You can't separate them. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
Most
that's right.
of the primary focus is on I. This puts the primary focus on how we are going to work together. And it requires of me, if I'm going to honor my commitments, to continue to grow in my ability to listen.
Yeah. Well, how interesting. So Steve Hardison was then one of your clients in creating. He was part of the team, right?
Yes.
What was it like to have him as a client?
Well, it was a delight and a challenge. He's always been inspiring, and he's always been a guy that had very few considerations, if any. So he, most of us operate in a field of considerations that constrain our what we do. Okay. That very little of that for him. His just takes actions, and it has a freedom in that way.
Yeah.
So there was an awful lot of that present, and he could be, he's a force to be reckoned with. So sometimes, it was a little bit of a challenge if we had some issues to work on or some that weren't working out so great, and needing to call that to his attention. And
can you give an example of what that means more specifically, of him being unconstrained by consideration?
Well, it could be as simple as most of us, we go to call somebody and we think about it a little bit. You don't just pick up the phone and call. It
was already like that 30 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and he'll test himself. He likes to test himself. Wild things in those days, like get on a plane without his plane ticket, and things like that to test himself.
Right.
So he was always that quality of
course,
big possibilities, challenging himself, and very few, if any, considerations. It wasn't constrained in the way that most people are.
Yeah. And what else do you remember from those first early times when you were still developing the Rodel way? What do you remember from that time that you want to share?
Well, let's see. There were so many. So we were all working together to bring this way of working and relating into reality. So just because you have the insight and you do the training, that's not sufficient. And then how do you keep it requires that you practice and moment and get and enroll enough leaders in the company, throughout the company, to really pull this off so that we end up having this environment. And at the same time, it moves into the environment very quickly. And one of the things that we hadn't anticipated when we took on the practice is how much it would attract some of the best and the brightest in the industry. So while we couldn't have as many PhDs as the competition did, our environment attracted the leading PhD in the field of planarization. He came and joined us. And a few months after being there, he approached me and said, "Lloyd, I just want you to know, this is the first time in my career where who I'm competing against is the competition." Always before, what he felt was who he was competing against with his co-workers. And and we weren't really competing against the competition.
Yeah, you were being one for another.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when you really get that going, it is so powerful. And,
I feel that.
So to play together in that way, it was so many people that were part of Rodel you ran in that period. When you connect with them, they'll say, "This is the highlight of my career," was that period.
Yeah.
And Steve was one of those leaders that was inspiring and was a part of the whole thing until came the point in time when it was.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing work you did with Rodel, with Steve. In the book, the chapter's called Demolition.
Yes.
2 sessions you have with him. He's left completely feeling kind of, I'm going to actually just read this because I want to hear this from you. It's quite extraordinary what happened after 2 sessions. Steve remembers curling into the fetal position and Lloyd wrapping his arms around him. Lloyd whispered, "Steve, there's nothing left for you to prove. You're okay. Everything's all right. There's nothing left to prove." What happened in that time? What do you remember from that?
Well, that's a big question. There's a lot there. In that moment right there, he had tapped into an extraordinary vein of anger that he had not expressed and had been underneath the surface. And I had done everything I could think of to dispel that anger, and nothing worked. Mm-hmm. And he's not a small guy. And for a long time, I had the file cabinet that was next to where he was laying, that had the crack from his kick into the file cabinet, just as a reminder of that day. But I knew he needed to come to peace. And so I got down on the floor and embraced him.
Beautiful.
And fortunately, we connected, and he was able to come to center. And
that's really, I'm really touched by that, because there's often, we forget, right, that he's human like all of us, and he's had his own processes and things that he's been through, and to be able to speak to you, who was a witness of that and who was able to help him through that was really profound. And what happened after that was, I'm going to read page 116 on Monday morning.
Let me just say that what the process was.
Yeah, please.
Was it was called the break in belonging.
Okay.
It was it took the perspective that for all of us, almost all of us, we came into this world belonging. The sense of our connection, there was no separateness. We fully belong. And there's some point in our journey where we find ourselves not belonging. And we really feel that. And there is a reaction to that occurs. And whatever that reaction is, how we react at that moment, and the decisions that get made out of that reaction define and shape your life going forward. And so in the break and belonging, what we were doing, the intent was to get back as close to that as we can. You don't have to get back to that exact moment, because it just keeps playing out forever. So for the rest of your life. So you get back early to a really moment when that's running. Okay.
You get present to a time where you go from belonging to breaking to belonging.
Yeah. To not belonging.
To not belonging. Yeah. Yeah.
And what's happening right there. And so that you can care for that reactivity, you can care for that reaction, you can care for yourself there. And to come back to have freedom, so that you're not in that moment. Yes, that reaction may come up. Like for me, it was when my mom left me when I was 3.5 years old. Mm-hmm. And the decisions I made at that moment were defined how I related, and especially like an intimate relationship, that fear of losing being chosen.
Right.
Okay. Whenever that came up, I would then turn into myself, and I'm going it my own. I'm alone. I have no one. I'm going to care for myself. I'm And that's not a great way to do relationship. Okay. So it was in my process of coming to to be kind with that experience as it comes, for me, it was ultimately to love. Hello, my love, you're here again.
Hmm.
And now it's a call, awakening to there's something up that needs to be attended to. But let's come to center.
Yeah.
To this from here. Okay. So this is what that process was really about. And so for Steve, it was reaching very deep into this core where he'd been abandoned, where violence had happened against him that was very difficult to confront. And it took a good long process till he could befriend that fully.
Yeah.
But it opened the door for him to be able to have that possibility, to come to not be in this, identify as that reactivity, in this battle against that reactivity.
Yeah. I mean, what a journey. You helped create the Rodel way, and then you took him through that process. 6 months of, from what I read in the book, it was really just 6 months of feeling defeated. And eventually he quit Rodel. And that you also accompanied him with that decision.
Yeah, help facilitate the process.
And facilitated even the process. Yeah.
It was one of the most challenging periods, one of the really challenging periods of such a fine line to walk.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
And do my utmost to walk that in integrity.
Yeah.
My friendship for him, and out of my commitment to Rodel and to the whole thing. I was very challenged, as it was for him and everybody else that was involved.
Yeah.
Fortunately, the way came through that as much as possible worked for everyone. So, and as you get more distance from it, it worked out really great for everybody. So,
yeah, of course. Yeah.
So, I mean, Steve wouldn't be who he is today if he had tried to stay there. So,
yeah,
it wasn't the right place for him any longer. And it was hard to let go because he was so much of creating Rodel. And
of course.
So,
did you stay on with Rodel after that?
Yes, I did.
And what did you learn from facilitating that experience?
Well, I don't know that I've tried to answer that question before. I just know that it was, you talk about walking in the unknown. It was just, expanding my capacity to walk in the unknown and be at risk.
Yeah. Yeah.
They have so much at risk, and then do what and just keep listening with everything I could bring to the game, and practicing all of the collaborative way. It was an ultimate moment of that practice.
Yeah. I mean, and also like what I'm hearing is just an ultimate expression of trust in yourself and the collaborative way in the process.
And the unfolding. Yeah.
And the unfolding and the unknown. Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Over the next, it's been now 25 years that you're sharing the collaborative way?
Well, it's more than that, because the collaborative way came into existence in 1990.
Yeah.
And then, so I've been doing that primarily since 1990, and we started taking it out to other companies in something like 94, I think it was.
Yeah. So here's what I'm interested. If we just take a look at just one aspect, listening with generosity. Now, for a lot of companies, the training of listening is very focused on the doing and the techniques. And there's this thing called active listening that many leaders and managers are trained in. But your way is really looking who you're being that's actually doing the listening. So, or maybe I'll ask this, like, what's different with the listening generosity to what, for example, active listening or the different levels of listening that you would find in most in most traditional leadership training programs?
Well, okay, there's a lot similar, okay, and there are things that are different. One is the we again, is that we're, will to work on you listening generously or listening actively, okay, and you take your course and you learn to listen actively, but there's no, and then we get back together and we're all like, it hasn't gotten that we're going to listen actively to each other. And we have a commitment to active listening here. And we're going to learn together to be really good at actively listening. And we're going to master this together. That's one thing that's usually missing. The other is that we work even at the normal level of how listening is trained, if you can get a little more of that we present, it'll go a long ways.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the things that we do a few things like that aren't the normal, is that we'll start off by going, if you're interested to really get good at listening generously, what we first do is let's back up a little bit and look at your relationship to listening. And then we invite people to begin to see how they actually hold listening in low regard when it comes to how they behave.
Yeah.
Okay.
I see that. Yeah.
Behave as though their listening makes very little impact.
Right? Yes.
Then we have ways for them to very directly experience that, and they'll see, and they see the impact that the way they're listening is having on another person and what it's like to have that over here, the impact that it has. Yeah. And then you open it up to see that however you're listening in any moment is impacting the people around you. So you're at a meeting and you're not listening, it has having impact, but we don't behave as though it does. I'm just here doing my emails until something interesting comes along. That is having an impact on what's being, on not just the energy in the room, but what's actually being said. Because the way you listen impacts what the other person actually says.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it impacts the words that come out of their mouth, or it impacts what you hear, or both?
Yeah, both.
Yeah. Yeah. I never considered that. How you listen actually changes the words that come out of the person's mouth.
Exactly. It does.
Yeah. I never considered that. That's amazing. Yeah.
And so you start to wake up to that. Whew,
wow. Yeah.
just a little bit.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Is it just the way I'm listening that's having this big guy be such a jerk? Or maybe it's not just him or her. It has something to do with the way I'm listening.
Yeah, of course. That makes total sense.
I'm bringing into this situation right now.
Yeah.
Whoa. And then it's not just, and then what's also the case is you're always listening through filters.
That's right.
So I got a filter like, here's the accountant, or a filter on this, go ahead. But I take it, whatever I hear that gets through all these different filters that I have, I take whatever I hear to be what the person is actually saying. And I deal with them like that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
But many times that's not what's getting, they aren't saying what I'm hearing. It's a blend of what's they're saying and my filters, and then it's what gets through. Yeah. And then that's, but I don't check to see, what it seems like you're saying is this, or
what is their intention and what are you actually hearing?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so to begin to notice your filters so that you can, one, wake up to the fact you're always listening through filters. 2, begin to build the skill to recognize your filters. And 3, then elevate your skill in being able to set that filter aside a bit and bring some curiosity, a new level of curiosity forward to hear what's you couldn't hear. My mom is this way. Oh, okay, that's a big filter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And we got those, my dad is this way. And if I can just notice that's a filter and move that just a little aside and bring a new level of curiosity, miracles happen.
Right. And these filters, they're like blind spots for leaders in organizations.
They are.
What would you, from your experience from the work we've seen, what would you say are some of the biggest blind spots most leaders have they're not even aware of when it comes to filters?
That they have them.
So the biggest blind spot is the fact that they even have them. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not just leaders, it's all of us.
All of us, of course.
As if we don't have filters.
Yeah. We live and operate as if we're free of filters. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just if you can get that. So that background stuff, then you can pay, like the skills of listening generously, pay attention.
Yeah.
First one. Well, that's really hard.
What's really hard?
Pay attention.
Paying attention is really hard. Yeah. Yeah.
You wake up to what paying attention is. I mean, hey, meditation is simply pay attention. Notice every time you get distracted, return.
Right.
To center.
Yeah.
So meditate, really, if you really get into the practice of listening generously, listening itself is a meditative practice. You're returning to center constantly.
Yeah.
Because you're noticing you're getting distracted.
That's true. I'm reminded, gosh, how like my listening has evolved over the years. But my goodness, my poor ex-girlfriend, I remember she would come home and she would tell me things and I would just nod and be like, And I was an expert at faking listening.
Yes.
And I was always, even with my whole family, I was always distracted and I never was able to really pay attention. And every so often someone would say something and I'd be like, oh, my interest would spark. And then it would be obvious that I hadn't been listening the whole time and it would drive everyone crazy. And I just didn't understand what was wrong.
Yeah.
And I've lived, most of my life that way, Lloyd. And I was just in the dark I didn't know.
So you just started paying attention and wake up to that practice, like what you're seeing, how much is to what we call replicate, but that's what others will talk about, paraphrase or feedback, which is one of the active listening, but it's in a little different frame. Okay. It's in the frame of being responsible for your listening and being responsible for the fact you got filters. So I'm going to check. I hear this. That might not be what you said because I got filters and I know you got filters. We all got. So to be a bit more responsible for the miracle of actually hearing what you say, I'm going to check.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we get better and better at being able to be effectively to listen to each other. And then the last skill is that of recreate, where what we call recreate, others will call listening with empathy or various other terms they'll use. But what we're working at getting is to over into the other person's shoes so that as close as you can't get in their shoes, but over close as you can to look out at the world from where they're viewing as much as possible so that you're appreciating how they're feeling, appreciating their perspective, appreciating their commitment, and checking to see if you actually are and not trusting that just because you think you're there, you're there.
Oh my God. And it's so needed. And ultimately that level of listening, it's an act of love.
Yes.
To listen from that place for hearing what's really being said. And what are meetings like when people actually listen like that? I've never been in a meeting like that within the context of like an organization?
Well, it was like Rodel, going back to Rodel, that was a time of unbelievable change going on there.
Yeah.
89, 90 was the beginning of the quality movement and ISO 9000 and all this kind of stuff. And it was a wild time. And we'd have consultants come into Rodel that were teaching not change management, but quality and ISO 9000 and those kind of things. And then you go, what's wrong with you guys? There's no defensiveness. You just change. You just learn. What is the deal here?
Yeah.
Our intel would come in and the guys on the line would make eye contact with them, not because we said to, but it was a natural response for them. And they're saying, what is happening here? We want to work with you.
Yeah.
So it is, you are pointing at it. It's quite remarkable. I mean, there's a company that I work with that's been practicing the collaborative way for over 27 years now. And, wow. You talk to people and they say, headhunters, they're very successful. Headhunters are calling me all the time, but I don't know anywhere else in the industry that you can work in an environment like this. And what's the cool thing is then it doesn't just stay in the company. When you start listening that way in the company, you bring that home.
Yeah, of course.
Beautiful things that happen at home. Yeah. So the work now starts to be a developmental environment for supporting you in being more effective spouse, parent, community member, etc. That's a dream come true.
That's beautiful. Well, that sounds like you're creating a collaborative world there, Lloyd.
Doing my best in this tiny little space,
Yeah, well, it's been such a joy and such an inspiration to hear from you. Thank you for sharing. Just so eloquently, and I'm really, I love the practicality as well of what you brought to the conversation, especially around listening and the possibility for all of us. So this is one, I'll go back to and listen again. Thank you. We've already come to the end of our time together. Is there something you would like to share before we complete this episode?
Just it's been a real delight to engage with you. I appreciate the listening that you brought to this and the openness you brought, and it's just a real delight to be able to share. And it's I appreciate what you're doing in working to contribute to the planet and contribute to the opening of possibility for other human beings. So,
amazing! Thank you so much. And for those that are listening and who want to know more about the collaborative way, where's the best, or who would like to be in touch with you? What would be the best way for them to do that?
To go to our website, and then you can link to us, or there's a lot of information there, and plus access to us. So it's
so we'll put a link. The website is the collaborativeway.com.
Collaborativeway.com.
Perfect. We'll put those links in the show notes. Once again, Lloyd Fickett, thank you so much. It's been a delight. And thank you to all our listeners from the podcast. Have a great day, and thanks you again. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you know someone who would benefit from today's conversation, please share this podcast with them. Also, we invite you to visit theultimatecoachbook.com so you can continue your personal exploration of being. There you will find links to join our wonderful community, get your own copy of the Ultimate Coach book, and more. Simply go now to www.theultimatecoachbook.com. That's www.theultimatecoachbook.com. The link is also available in the show notes. We appreciate your support. Be blessed. Be you.